Hey guys, welcome to Ammo Types Part 2.
Oi, turn that text-to-speech off. Anyways, welcome to Ammo Types Part 2, voiced by yours truly, SK Doger. In this video, I will be explaining how chemical energy shells, aka high explosive shells, work. I recommend turning subtitles on if you can't understand my thick accent. Also, you should join my Discord server. You can talk with the community, and we do weekly Hard Surviving 4 multiplayer games. We also do Warzone and community games every now and then too. Anyways, I know this video is long overdue, but here it is. Enjoy. High explosive shells are the most basic form of chemical energy shells. When they come in contact with anything, the whole shell combusts, sending a piece of shrapnel around like a grenade. Since it explodes on contact, it cannot penetrate any armor. The most effective high explosive shells can be found on tanks with large caliber cannons such as the Sturmpanzer, the KV-2, and the Object 120. If the shell does get inside the tank, however, the effects are destructive. The shell is the equivalent of throwing a bomb inside of a tank. The shell explodes inside the tank, which kills the crew and destroys modules. You shouldn't rely on this shell to kill normal tanks though. You should only use this shell to destroy lightly armored vehicles such as SPAAGs and open-top tanks. However, any other shell works just as good to destroy those vehicles, so you don't need to bring high explosive into battle. This shell also has 3 additional variants: high explosive with distance fuse, high explosive base fuse, and high explosive variable time fuse shell. High explosive distance fuse works just like its name. It's a high explosive shell with a distance fuse. This shell travels a set distance and then it explodes. The second one, the high explosive base fuse, is a high explosive shell that detonates after it goes through a set amount of armor. Normal high explosive shells explode on contact, while this shell waits until it's inside the vehicle. These two shells are mainly found on naval cannons. The other variant, the high explosive shell variable time fuse, is a high explosive shell that explodes after a set amount of time, or if it detects something near it. This shell is good against aircraft and helicopters. All chemical energy shells explode on contact, which means if you hit any kind of obstacle, for example a tree, they will just explode on the tree and not reach your target, so be careful when you're firing. HESH shells are a bit more complicated than high explosive shells. Instead of exploding on contact, when the shell meets armor, the plastic tip of the shell squishes onto the armor, hence the name high explosive squash head, and then explodes. Since the shell is stuck onto the armor, the explosion causes a shockwave through the armor. The shockwave causes the armor inside the tank to explode and send pieces of armor inside the tank. That's why HESH has a better penetration on higher angles. When the shell meets armor on a high angle, the tip gets spread around more, thus causing a bigger shockwave. If you have the choice between HESH or heat, most of the times you should go for the heat. The penetration of HESH is mediocre at best, and the post-penetration effects aren't always how you want them to be. The shell has a tendency to not do anything and be consumed by a small piece of armor. You should use this shell to destroy medium or light tanks. Since all the shells mentioned in this video rely on chemical energy to penetrate armor, they don't lose penetration over distance, unlike the kinetic energy shells. This means chemical energy shells are great for sniping tanks over long distances. Use this feature to your advantage on big maps. Heat shells work just like their name. They're a high explosive shell that is designed to destroy tanks. When the shell meets armor, the high explosive filler of the shell explodes. The explosion causes the tip of the shell to go inside the tank at supersonic speeds. After the tip is inside the tank, it explodes, causing damage similar to that of a high explosive shell. The penetration of the shell varies greatly, but it's very effective on taking out light to medium tanks. It isn't great when versing heavily armored vehicles, however. Overall, this is a great shell to substitute APHE when you need a little bit more penetration. This shell also has a variant called Heat Grenade, found mainly on recoilless rifles and IFVs. They are mainly the same with some slight differences. The Heat Grenade shells are somewhat better than Heat, but other than that, the Heat Grenade shell just has a different image in the stack card. Heat FS shells can be summed up as a more modern heat shell. They have a higher muzzle velocity than Heat, and they also have a more lethal warhead. On average, HEATFS shells can penetrate 300mm of armor at any range, making them an excellent shell for sniping. The post-penetration effects are similar to heat, but with more spalling and explosives. However, most tier 6 to 7 tanks have very high protection against chemical energy shells, so it's better to use APFS-DS rather than HEATFS if you can. An ATGM is a rocket-propelled HEATFS shell that you can guide. They have the same penetration mechanic as heat and HEATFS. They explode on contact, which sends the tip of the shell inside the tank, and then the tip explodes. ATGMs take up more space than regular shells though, so you can't bring as many ATGMs as you could other shells. Although they travel much slower than standard ammunition, this shell is the best one for sniping, since you can guide the shell and it isn't affected by gravity. However, you can't control ATGMs forever. Once they're at a range, they'll go in a straight line. This shell is great for taking out anything, even aircraft. If the enemy is hiding behind a corner, you can guide an ATGM around the corner to hit your target. Use this shell on big maps to snipe tanks. Smoke shells create a smoke screen when they come in contact with anything. They provide a tactical advantage when you need to retreat or advance without the enemy seeing you. The smoke screen lasts around 20 to 30 seconds. You shouldn't rely on smoke shells to destroy vehicles, but nobody's stopping you from trying. A noticeable trait of smoke shells is that they are much slower than any other shell, since they're filled with a smoke-generating material instead of charge. Use this shell to create some cover and go sneaky-breaky around the battlefield. So yeah, that was Ammo Types Part 2 by SK Dojer. Join my Discord for Ammo Types Part 3.